delighted to have Charlie Baker, who is the Senior Director of Product Management at Oracle, and Scott Hilton, who until recently was VP of Product Development at Oracle, talk about how they took the needs-based segmentation, applied it when they were at Dyn very successfully, and they can talk about the process they went through and the impact that we had. Because as we just finished talking about, doing segmentation effectively is very difficult. But we thought the group would benefit from hearing one approach that worked. So Scott, Charlie, take it away and let you introduce yourself. We'll go back in time to the days of Dyn.
Excellent.
So Scott,
yep. So thank you all very much. What we're going to talk about here is actually a strategic initiative that we had at Dyn. We were a fast-growing SaaS company. We had a single product. We ran folks' DNS services, or domain name services, and we did it for some of the largest properties on the internet. Some of the huge web properties, PayPal, Spotify, Pandora, you name it, we probably were running their DNS. Our challenge was we were seeing commoditization pressure on that service, and we knew that our addressable market was small for a single service. So we were looking strategically for how to expand out of that great base of customers and positioning we had into a broader market. So at that time, Charlie and I were part of the product team, and we were looking at how we can expand our business. Next slide. So what we ended up looking at was adjacent markets, and one of the key ones was around performance management of internet properties. So how do you know you're getting good performance from a latency perspective, and also that your internet routing was proper and not being routed all over the world when you could have a direct path to the customer. So we acquired a company called Renesys that specialized in internet performance monitoring. They had hundreds of probes all over the planet. They had access to the routing tables of all the major carriers, and they provided alerting, alarming, and analytics on internet performance. So we went through the process of buying Renesys, and that expanded our value prop and our positioning to be an internet performance company, not just a DNS company. And what we were working on as we were ingesting Renesys was how do we position and bring the Renesys capabilities to our 7,000 customers? And then how do we expand our market opportunity through that? And so we spent some time talking with Neil, and he and I had a relationship, was how do we do this in a way that's going to be effective? And this really came to how do we segment this market and this capability we have of our 7,000 customers in a way that gets at their highest urgency of need folks to buy this internet performance capability. Next slide. Now, we had a couple of internal challenges, like typically happens when you want to think about shifting segmentation or the way you approach the market. So the first was that the Renesys go-to-market team had narrowly focused on two segments, government customers and telcos. And these were not aligned at all with what Dyn's customer base was, which was all the web properties. So the first thing we had to break down was how to position the value prop. Even the way we talked about the products was very narrow with the Renesys team. And they were having a tough time figuring out how to expand into our market. Flip side, the Dyn team had no idea about this technology, how it applied, how they might position it with their customers. And their approach was going to be, well, let's just pitch it. Let's put together some slides and we'll go talk to each of our customers and we'll see what happens. And we realized that was not going to be a successful approach. So we engaged with Neil and went through a urgency of need process. So Charlie, you want to kind of go through that process and then what our results were?
Absolutely. So, as we acquire the company, get through the acquisition, there was a lot of salespeople, marketing pressure of, all right, now let's go make the big splash. Let's increase the revenue. And Scott mentioned there's 7,000 customers. Let's go sell this. But we actually were able to take an opportunity and step back and say, this isn't just a shiny new toy. How do you explain it to a customer? How do you make them feel that value framework that we talked about earlier, right? Do they have a fire in the house and can you run and sell it right away? Or do you need to work on this account and figure out the messaging, positioning, explain what the urgency is? So we walked through the entire model, from the internal perception of the customer value. What did the current acquiring company think the value of the product was? What did they tell their customers? What were they thinking that we should go do? On the customer side, there were current customers. It wasn't like this was a new product with no customers. What were the current customers of the products doing with the products today? What did they think the gaps were? What was the commonality between those customers? Then we started to do the urgency of need exercises. Who had the fire in the house? Who could use this right away? How did that match up with our customer base? And as we figured out what those segments were in that urgency of need, we started to get the internal alignment across all the teams and say, okay, from a sales, from a marketing, from a product management perspective, what do we need to do next to successfully take the product to the customer who has the urgent unmet need and position it correctly, explain to them what we need, get the best salespeople on it, and get them trained up and have a formal plan in place for go-to-market sales product that we could execute based on those needs. So if you go to the next slide, we'll just give you an example of the breakdown of how we did some of the segmenting and targeting. Scott mentioned it was internet performance, but not everybody cares about internet performance. So on the urgent unmet need side, we had people who were very dependent on the internet for their business. The people who were dependent on the internet for their business were the initial take of the segmentation that said, okay, they look like a good fit. And then we had to get into even more detail about what were they dependent on it for? Did they own the assets that they actually were dependent on? Were they cloud-based? And we got into some subsegments of, were they worried about security problems? Were they worried about microsecond latency? Were they in something like a stock platform where they really need to understand what's happening on the internet and do things to get the best performance? They fell into that most urgent category of, if there's performance problems, our business loses money. And then we started to look across the rest of the customer base and the segmentation and said, well, who has the non-urgent need, right? These are the companies that are still on the internet, but they don't have that same performance aspect. Their business doesn't go down if something happens on the internet. They don't lose millions of dollars per second. But you needed to educate that group and actually talk about, here's why it still matters, right? These are the impacts of what could happen. And as we continued through the segmentation, we found we had customers who only had branded websites for marketing reasons. It really didn't matter for this product. And then we found other customers, there were some adjacent competitive products that fit the need already. If you found they were using them, they were in the need already met category. So we kind of broke down the acquisition and the product, and we got very specific. And I'll show one example on the next slide, if you can go, Neil, of one of the use cases we came up with was somebody who was expanding. And we mentioned they own data centers on the internet. And how would you attack somebody? What was the sales play? What's the model you use to go and present to them using the urgency of need framework? So, this doesn't go straight to segmentation, as we were talking earlier. There's no industry segment for somebody who's expanding to another location or into another data center in another country, but companies across the world are doing it. So we started to look at the characteristics of the company. Were they a hosting company? Were they an independent company? The size of those companies, who was in our current customer base. We built a value prop for each level of the urgency framework. We aligned that to a sales channel. We had a partner team in one aspect. We had direct sales in another. We put specific marketing materials in it and targets for the other end of the marketing. Who was the consumer of the marketing material we were going after? And then we built case studies off of that as well, directly from the customer base that was already using it. And we basically had 3 use cases that we came up with for the products. We did this segmentation for each one, and we sent the sales team off with our materials based on this segmentation. The next slide, Neil.
Sure. But one thing, Charlie and Scott, is the specificity. We didn't just look at, industries or even company size, but really went into the level of characteristics, in terms of the fire model, if you will. You really found the houses that really had the fire.
Exactly.
Yep. And by the way, that was one use case. That's just people planning where their next data center could go. We did a similar urgency of need around the performance. So MarTech and AdTech companies were really sensitive to internet performance. And so we did another segmentation around those highly sensitive from a latency perspective types of customers.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember there was a large nationally known newspaper that we spent time with really analyzing, but it wasn't just a newspaper business. It was this global icon newspaper that really had the need and really had the fit the characteristics. If it was just a small organization, newspaper, maybe there wasn't the same level of need, even though they're both in the newspaper business.
Yeah, the global reach was really important. If they had an audience that was, outside of the US, it was really important to understand internet performance.
And that's kind of what we went into look. So it wasn't just newspapers, it was newspapers with global reaches, for example, would perform very differently than just a general localized newspaper. Yeah, go ahead, gentlemen.
So just quickly on the process itself and how we got the alignment, we brought in a consultant to help. That allowed us to be able to break the acquiring company, acquiree company. We know what we're doing. We built this product. We'll tell you where it fits. Well, we bought you. We'll tell you where we want to put it. We brokered a middle ground there, so we could actually interview both sides, internal stakeholders, current customers. We had an interview framework we used to talk about, what worked well, what's fitting, where's the urgent need, and the segmentation that was just mentioned by Neil and Scott. As we applied the framework, we really tried to get into where can we get the fastest wins? Where can we immediately go after our customer base? Where do we not have customers, but we know that there's a target out there to go get? And then, as I mentioned in the slide about that one sales play for that expansion, we went and put full marketing, sales, training, data packages together so that we could give almost account-based prospect lists to the sales teams where they could go after specific customers with highly targeted information and not just generic to the market messaging that would come back out. And it was value-based content marketing against each of these sales plays that we did.
Right, exactly. So it wasn't just go out, it was really, calling houses to the fire extinguishment. It was, here are the houses with fires. Go call on them.
Yeah, and the anecdote that's a little creepy is that because we knew a lot about the performance of the internet overall and about how everything was connected and structured, the sales team was actually able to walk into a customer knowing more about their network than they typically would see. And the customers would come back and say, how do you know this? And there was this piece of the sales play that was, we know this because this is what we do. And here is exactly what you look like on the internet. Here's how you're connected. Here's what's happening. So it was a great door opener as well, because we were able to segment and target toward the urgent unmet need. So Scott, go ahead and jump in here with me. The short-term impact, we had a repeatable process. We went from a handful of partners to numerous enterprise customers in the first few months. It was a very quick ramp. Once we went from closed acquisition to engagement on the framework to implementing the sales plays, there was immediate uptick across the customer base, and you see some of the logos of the bigger customers that we landed.
Yeah, right. And I think it was like 50 customers you landed within a matter of months. I think.
It was
and
fast.
then we use that as a platform in the win. It's like a flywheel. Like once sales and marketing sees this is working, then they started, doing more of this as we went from the high urgency of need and started going to the right towards the lower urgency of need. We had a pattern and a muscle memory on how to do it. So it was really effective.
Yeah, and I think there was one salesperson, it was Kelly or something, who really got it, and she became the showcase.
Yeah.
Once you got one salesperson to do it successfully, you were able to repeat, lather, rinse, repeat with other salespeople as well.
Yep. Can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
So there's also, so that was sort of the tactics of integrating this company and getting them kind of plugged into our customer base. But it really had a huge strategic value because it helped us reposition Dyn as an internet performance management company. And we moved from a single product model to a platform, internet performance platform, addressed a much larger TAM, higher valuation. And we ended up in a kind of a bidding war for our company in around 2016, and we were bought by Oracle. And part of the kind of value of the company was driven off of this huge amount of data and product we had in internet performance, which was a huge need within Oracle as they were building out their cloud platform. And the technology is still being used by Oracle. There's two aspects of it. It's used for internal management, like where we put data centers and performance management of the cloud, but it's also used for marketing. Basically, it monitors the whole world's internet, and Oracle is continually putting out alerts on impacts of internet outages or reroutes on the internet. And you can see this. You can subscribe to this Twitter channel if you want, Internet Intelligence, and you'll get a continuous feed of what's going on in the internet. And Charlie, I don't know if you have any other perspective on that.
Let's go to the last one, close it out with what worked well.
Yeah, so one of the things that was really important was getting that third-party perspective, because as Charlie mentioned, we had not only do we have Dyn's kind of momentum and inertia around what they thought was their market and all that, but you had this company coming in who was selling to a completely different market. How do you bring those together? So having a third party involved was very important. The ability to translate this very technical product into a business value was huge, because the initial discussions with Renesas was all about the tech. How many probes they had, how they did analysis, what did this alert mean, and that really was hard. We were having a tough time just converting that into a business value prop. And this urgency of need really got that nailed. We could actually assign numbers and ROIs to buying our product, focusing on the use cases rather than broad segmentation, and then really pushing us to challenge our existing assumptions and approach on both sides.
I think the other thing we don't have on the slide here, Scott, is that we also learned a lot about our current customer base. There were a lot of perceptions that we broke down as we did segmentation for where the new product would fit. It forced us to really understand who were the current customers and what did they really do and what was our relationship like. And could we walk into the person we were selling our core product to and have a conversation about the new product. So it helped us there as well to educate the sales team across who they knew, what they knew, and break down some of the perceptions that existed there too. Yeah,
and I'll follow up on that. One of the things that we learned in that process, which was a little bit of a setback or an impediment, is we thought that the buyer persona that we had always talked to was the same one who cared about internet performance. And in this process, we realized we were going to have to expand who we went to in these accounts. That the director of infrastructure that we had been talking to about DNS wasn't the same one who managed the network performance and the routing. So it actually helped us quickly realize we had to do more expansion of the personas within our targets than we thought.
Okay, great. Just to wrap up, gentlemen, so Oracle buys lots of companies, and sometimes the executives stay, many times the executives leave, many times the executives they buy the technology, and the executives get moved aside. Why don't you talk about the impact that this process had on you and your subsequent careers and opportunities at Oracle?
Well, I mean, in part, I think it positioned us as a much more strategic acquisition, which meant that we were integrated in at a higher level. And now we did a typical acquisition, folks like the CFO, the head of, talent, those kind of folks kind of drifted away pretty quickly. But the core tech organization and the core go-to-market organization was preserved because we had a bigger value prop and a bigger role inside Oracle than we would have if we had just had a single product.
Yeah, and I would just say there's been a lot of opportunity. I'm still there over the last 4 years since we've been acquired to continue to make a difference because of the technology, the importance, and what we've done to integrate inside the company. So we're part of the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Group now that's on a good ride. So we'll see where it goes.
Excellent, excellent. So what was your, Scott, I know you've moved on to teach at Tufts, but what was your last role there? And how many people were working for you?
So I was VP of product development, which meant I had product management and engineering and operations for all of the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure network services and edge services. So that included VPN, transit services, our CDN, our DNS services, our web application firewall proxy service, our monitoring service. So it was a big chunk of the product portfolio for OCI. I think I had 25 products under me. And I also had about 500 people.
Okay, excellent. And Charlie, what do you?
So my role expanded from product management into a role now where I have a team of about 40 people who are in charge of usability for the UI UX across virtual networking, solution architecture, partner development for our direct connectivity, and product management now. So it's been a good opportunity to expand scope and be formally part of the engineering org actually inside of Oracle at this point.